Welcome to the Atlantic Perspectives podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the White House in Europe with Maxime Lobé. In the previous episode, we left the US under the presidency of James Polk, a president who dramatically reshaped the map of North America through the Mexican-American War and the acquisition of vast Western territories. At first glance, the United States seems to be at the height of its power. The country now stretches from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific. The economy is growing rapidly. Millions of immigrants from Europe are crossing the Atlantic to settle in the young American Republic. But behind this success lies a question that American leaders have been avoiding for decades. Should slavery be allowed in the new territories or should it be prohibited? This question now threatens the political balance of the country. At the same time, Europe is going through major upheavals of its own. In 1848, revolutions break out in Paris, Berlin, Vienna, Milan, and Budapest. People across the continent demand greater political freedoms and representation. Americans follow these events closely. Many believe their republic appears more stable than the European monarchies shaken by revolution. But that stability is misleading. For nearly 70 years, American presidents have defined their place in relation to Europe. Against Great Britain after independence, against revolutionary France, and against European colonial ambitions in the Americas. But beginning in 1849, something changes. For the first time, the greatest threat facing the US does not come from abroad. It comes from within. During the 12 years between James Polk and Abraham Lincoln, 4 presidents tried to preserve the Union. Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan. 4 different men, 4 often forgotten presidencies, and 4 administrations that witnessed the gradual collapse of the American political system. March 1849, Washington, D.C. Zachary Taylor takes the oath of office as the 12th President of the US. Like Andrew Jackson and William Henry Harrison before him, Taylor is first and foremost a military hero. His reputation was built during the Mexican-American War. But when he arrives at the White House, the foreign policy questions that dominated previous presidencies begin to fade into the background. Debates about Great Britain, France, Oregon, and Texas gives way to a deeper crisis. Should the territories acquired from Mexico be open to slavery? The issue immediately divides the country. The debate is also closely watched in Europe. Since the abolition of slavery throughout most of the British Empire in 1833, Great Britain has become the world's leading abolitionist power. The Royal Navy fight the Atlantic slave trade, and many British voices openly condemn slavery. In the American South, this development creates growing suspicion. Some Southern leaders believe British hostility towards slavery indirectly threatens their economic and social interest. For the first time, the slavery question becomes an issue closely followed on both sides of the Atlantic. Taylor himself surprises many observers. Although he owned slaves, he wanted to prevent the institution from expanding into the new Western territories. His position worries many Southerners. Some political leaders even begin openly discussing the possibility of secession. The crisis becomes increasingly serious. But in July 1850, before a lasting solution can be found, Zachary Taylor dies suddenly after only 16 months in office. For the second time in American history, a president dies while serving. His vice president, Millard Fillmore, succeeds him. July 1850, Washington, D.C., Millard Fillmore inherits a deeply divided country. His immediate priority is preventing the Union from breaking apart. In Congress, several leaders attempt to build a new compromise between North and South. The result is the Compromise of 1850. California enters the Union as a free state. The territories of Utah and New Mexico are allowed to decide the slavery question for themselves. In return, Congress adopts a new Fugitive Slave Act. In the short term, the compromise appears to work. The crisis seems temporarily postponed. But while American leaders focus on domestic tensions, relations between the United States and the wider world continue to evolve. Hundreds of thousands of Irish immigrants flee the Great Famine. Thousands of Germans leave Europe after the failure of the revolutions of 1848. Many choose to settle in the US. These immigrants contribute to the economic growth and gradually transform American society. British capital also continues to finance railroads, banks, and infrastructure projects across the country. Even though Washington still avoids political alliances with European powers, the two sides of the Atlantic become more interconnected every year. But Fillmore is not looking only toward Europe. His administration is also becoming increasingly interested in Asia. For decades, Great Britain, France, and other European powers have expanded their commercial presence in Asian waters. The US does not want to be left behind. In 1852, Fillmore decides to send a naval expedition led by Commodore Matthew Perry to Japan. The goal is ambitious. Japan has lived in voluntary isolation for more than 2 centuries. American leaders hope to establish diplomatic and commercial relations with the country. This decision reveals an important change. The United States is no longer looking only toward Europe or its own continent. It is beginning to see itself as a global trading power. When Fillmore leaves office in 1853, many Americans still hope that the Compromise of 1850 has permanently settled the slavery issue. That hope does not long last. The man who succeeds him is Franklin Pierce. March 1853, Washington, D.C. Franklin Pierce becomes the 14th President of the United States. Young, energetic, and deeply committed to the unity of the Democratic Party, he hopes to reduce the tensions dividing the country. Instead, his presidency has the opposite effect. One of the most revealing episodes of his administration actually takes place in Europe. Since the days of Thomas Jefferson, many American leaders have been interested in Cuba. Located less than 100 miles from Florida, the island holds a strategic position in the Caribbean. But Cuba still belongs to Spain. By the middle of the 19th century, many Americans believe that the remaining European empires should gradually disappear from the Western Hemisphere. This view is a direct continuation of the Monroe Doctrine proclaimed more than 30 years earlier. In 1854, 3 American diplomats meet in the Belgian city of Ostend. One of them is James Buchanan, then serving as U.S. Minister to Great Britain. Their task is to discuss the future of Cuba. The document they produce becomes known as the Ostend Manifesto. The diplomats recommend that the US purchase Cuba from Spain. They also argue that if Spain refuses, and if American security requires it, the US could be justified in taking the island by force. When the document becomes public, it immediately causes a scandal. In the North, many see it as an attempt to create new slave territories. In Europe, several governments view it as another example of American expansionism. The episode shows that despite growing domestic tensions, the US continues to define itself in relation to the European powers still present in the Americas. But the most serious crisis of Pierce's presidency unfolds at home. That same year, Congress passes the Kansas-Nebraska Act. The law allows the settlers of Kansas and Nebraska to decide for themselves whether slavery will be permitted. In practice, it overturns the political balance established by the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Almost Immediately, thousands of pro-slavery and anti-slavery activists flowed into Kansas. Violence spreads. Towns are attacked. Elections are disputed. Political activists are killed. Newspapers begin referring to Bleeding Kansas. For many Europeans, the situation is astonishing. The republic that had presented itself as a model of democratic stability now appears unable to resolve its division peacefully. British, French, and German newspapers closely follow the growing violence. The political consequences are enormous. The Whig Party collapses. A new political movement emerges, the Republican Party. Its goal is simple: to stop the expansion of slavery into the West. When Franklin Pierce leaves office in 1857, the United States is more divided than at any point since independence. Yet, the man who succeeds him has one of the strongest diplomatic backgrounds of his generation. His name is James Buchanan. March 1857, Washington, D.C. James Buchanan takes the oath of office as the 15th President of the United States. Since John Quincy Adams, few presidents have possessed such extensive experience in European affairs. During his career, he served as the American representative in London. He understands international diplomacy and the balance of power among the world's great nations. For many Americans, this experience seems like a major advantage. Many hope that a man skilled in diplomacy can also reconcile North and South. But events quickly slipped beyond his control. Only days after his inauguration, the Supreme Court issues its decision in the Dred Scott case. According to the court, black people cannot be American citizens, and Congress has no authority to prohibit slavery in federal territories. This decision sends shockwaves across the nation. In the North, it is seen as a victory for slaveholding interests. In the South, it is widely celebrated. Compromise becomes increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, European powers continue to watch developments closely. Great Britain depends heavily on Southern cotton. British textile mills import enormous quantities of American cotton every year. A breakup of the Union could therefore have major economic consequences across the Atlantic. Napoleon III's France is also watching carefully. Europe's great powers understand that the future of the US could reshape the global economic balance. But Buchanan proves unable to calm the growing tensions. In 1858, the debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas captured the attention of the entire country. The slavery issue now dominates American politics. In 1859, an abolitionist named John Brown attacks the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. His goal is to trigger a large-scale slave uprising. The attempt quickly fails. Brown is captured and executed. But the political consequences are enormous. In the North, some view him as a martyr of the abolitionist cause. In the South, many see him as a proof that their way of life is under direct threat. Distrust between the two regions reaches unprecedented levels. The presidential election of 1860 becomes the breaking point. The Democratic Party splits into rival factions. The Republicans nominate a former Illinois politician, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln wins the election without carrying a single slave state. For many Southern leaders, the result proves that they have lost influence within the federal government. A few weeks later, South Carolina announces its secession. Other states soon follow. Buchanan believes secession is illegal. But he also believes that the federal government lacks the authority to stop it by force. His administration remains largely polarized. When Buchanan leaves the White House in March 1861, the Union is already beginning to fall apart. The war has not started yet, but it has become almost inevitable. Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, and James Buchanan spent most of their presidencies trying to preserve the Union. None of them succeeds in resolving the slavery question. Yet, throughout these 12 years, the US continues to interact with the wider world. European immigration transforms American society. British capital fuels economic growth. Washington begins looking toward Asia throughout Commodore Perry's expedition. The Cuba controversy shows that the US continues to challenge the presence of European empires in the Americas, and European governments watch growing division within the American Republic with increasing concern. For nearly 70 years, American presidents have defined their place in relation to Europe. Now, a more fundamental question emerges. Can the United States remain united? In the next episode, we will follow Abraham Lincoln as he confronts the greatest crisis in American history, the Civil War. This was The White House in Europe with Maxime Lobé. Don't forget to subscribe and share the podcast. You can find Atlantic Perspectives on social media and at atlanticperspectives.org. Music licensed via Epidemic Sound.